The information discussed in this presentation is current as of the date noted, is for informational purposes only, and does not intend to address the financial objectives, situation, or specific needs of any individual investor. Any information is for illustrative purposes only and is not intended to serve as investment tax or legal advice, since the availability and effectiveness of any strategy is dependent upon your individual facts and circumstances. Results will vary, and no suggestion is made about how any specific solution or strategy will perform in reality.
Thanks so much, everyone, for having me join today. So what we'll be covering is, what does retirement preparedness really mean to you? Also, key decisions that shape a smooth transition into retirement, and also some common pitfalls to avoid before leaving the workforce. All right, so what does retirement really look like? Well, it's both a financial and a lifestyle transition. So you begin to move from saving. We're all like accustomed to putting money away for retirement. But guess what? Once you hit retirement, now it's flowing the opposite way, and you start spending that money that you've worked so hard to save for. And a very wise client once said, you need to retire to something and not from something. There is a psychology component to retirement, and sometimes it just is very different. So sometimes people might go through like a grieving process, or just really truly enjoy and love retirement. So the feeling of replacing kind of work checks that we're used to receiving, whether you're self-employed or receiving wage income, to taking on that personal responsibility of where to withdraw funds from. So common questions people ask is, do I have enough money to retire? Can I retire and do what I want to do? Will my income last as long as I do? And what happens if the stock market is volatile early in retirement? So there's some key pillars of retirement income. There's income and investments, which also lead to withdrawals. Maybe you want to look at paying down some debt. Sometimes people want to focus on that before retirement, or even doing some major home improvements. Maybe you need a new AC system, or maybe a new roof, and you want to get all those things done well in advance of retirement, so that way you're well on your way in accomplishing that. Also, taxes play in pretty predominantly into the retirement planning. Also, healthcare and healthcare cost. For those that want to retire before 65, before going on Medicare, like, what options are there? What are the costs associated? And also just lifestyle planning, just in general. Enjoying those trips that you've really wanted to go on. And what does that look like in retirement? So there's one thing that's really important to do, is understand your income versus your assets. So it's good to understand the different like account balances and account structures, because they could be treated differently in retirement when you go to withdraw from them. And that also could mean the income coming in from like Social Security as an example, and also just the withdrawals coming out of the 401k or 403b you worked so hard to grow and develop over the years. So it's not always about how much you have saved up or your net worth alone into establishing that retirement security. There's not just one amount that you need to save in order to have a secure retirement for your future, because everyone does things differently. People might want to travel differently. Some people, want a modest lifestyle, some may not. So it needs to fit your own desires and your wishes. So, one of the things that's really good to have an understanding of is your own cash flow. So, you want to understand your expenses, and that could include things that are more essential, such as your housing costs, utilities. We can't get away from that electric bill. I know, guys. Healthcare costs, and also food. We all have to eat, right? There's also discretionary expenses like traveling, maybe some fun hobbies that you have, and charitable giving. There's also one-time or maybe irregular expenses. Maybe you need a new car, or maybe a roof, any of those one-time things that may come up in our lives. And different people have different travel goals. So that tends to be one of the big topic items when I'm working with someone for their retirement plan. Also, family support or caregiving. Do you have aging parents or maybe a child that has needs? Or even maybe a child or a grandchild that's going on to college and you want to support their education? Also, relocation or downsizing. And it's not always downsizing, sometimes it's upsizing too, because as people's families are expanding, maybe they want to have a bigger like kitchen or living room space to be able to host those big families. And retirement doesn't necessarily need to look like, one date and that's your very last day, no more wage income coming in. It could very well mean a phased retirement where maybe you're retiring over a period of time, cutting down your work hours, maybe even quitting one job and picking up a fun job. So expenses don't necessarily stay the same throughout our retirement years. They could vary. So one expense that could vary over time would be healthcare costs. So maybe early on retirement, if you start, your healthcare through your employment, and then it transitions to maybe like a COBRA or a marketplace plan, and then later on Medicare, what does that look like? Also, there could be long-term care needs too to factor in. So it's really important to plan for a 20, 30, or even 40-year retirement, depending on when you wish to retire. So one of the first things I like to do when I'm working with someone is putting together what's called a balance sheet. So really a balance sheet is a snapshot of your assets, all of your liabilities, and really try to get an understanding what type of accounts are out there. Because each one could have a different impact in retirement where you might want to withdraw from, and also it could impact taxes too. So you want to get a good understanding of like the traditional accounts, such as like a traditional IRA, or maybe your 401ks, 403bs, which is your employer plans. Also income sources like a pension, for example. Also the brokerage accounts. So that could be like an account maybe in your name or in joint name with someone, because that will grow over time in theory, and then you'd be taxed on that growth as you're earning that type of account, versus when you go to withdrawal, there could be capital gains. And also your savings. So that would be money you put aside into like a checking, maybe a savings account. It could be online. It could be certificate of deposits. Potentially you have an employer stock or deferred compensation plan to take into consideration too. So different assets will be used in different ways. So I kind of touched on a little bit about the tax deferred. So tax deferred is the traditional component of like a traditional IRA, or maybe with your own employer retirement plans that you're contributing to. Could be a 401k or 403b. There could be a traditional component as well as a Roth component. So the traditional component is tax deferred. So you receive the tax benefit now for any contributions made into that plan. But guess what, guys? In retirement, when you go to do the withdrawal, you get the privilege of paying the taxes on the withdrawal. And it's taxed just like wage income tax. So it's subject to your tax brackets. Now, the tax-free, or what's considered like the Roth component, or maybe after-tax component of a 401k, 403b, or maybe a Roth IRA, since you've paid the taxes on the money contributing into the plan, guess what? The growth as well as the withdrawals are tax-free. So there could be some tax planning strategies to consider in retirement and where to withdraw from. It's not necessarily all or nothing. Sometimes it's a balance depending on your different tax brackets that you're in. And so different accounts can support different needs, and understanding the different buckets in retirement may help you understand where you might want to withdraw the funds from to accomplish your goals. And so in retirement, you begin to shift from a more like growth oriented perspective into a balance. So a balance could be the growth, income, and also the stability of your account. You want to make sure that you're aligning your investments with the timing of your retirement needs. So there's a general rule I want to share with you, and please take it with a grain of salt here. So however old we are is how much we should have invested outside of the stock market if we're going to use our retirement accounts for our own. So for example, someone that's 50 years old, you would have 50% saved outside of the stock market, maybe in like cash, fixed income, certificate of deposits, something that's meant to be a preservation piece of the portfolio. While the other 50% in that example could be subject to the stock market movements and growth there. And the reason, kind of the thought process is the older we get, the less stock market exposure we have, because the stock market could be volatile. So we want to take that into account, especially based on our own withdrawals and needs of those funds in retirement. And so you want to look at that and understand your own risk profile, work with a professional, do your own research if needed, to make sure that's a proper fit for you. Because the whole goal is to have your retirement assets grow at a pace that's reasonable for you and your needs. And you also don't want to take no risk, and you do want to take some risk depending. So a big topic item in retirement is Social Security. So when do you take Social Security? That's one of the biggest questions we get from our client base. And so you could take it as early as age 62. And then most people, their full retirement age is anywhere between 66 and 67 years old. And so for those that take it early, there is a permanent reduction in your Social Security benefit. It's roughly reduced about 5% each year. So for someone that's taking it at 62, it could be easily a 30% reduction based on the full retirement age of like 67, for an example. So one thing to keep in mind is if you want to continue working between age 62 and your full retirement age, we'll just say 67 in this example, then you want to be mindful of how much earned income or wage income that you're receiving during that period of time. So in 2026, you're limited to earning $24,480 of earned income if you're receiving your Social Security early, before your full retirement age. So for every $2 over that limit, you get to give $1 of your Social Security back. So we don't want to be in that situation if we can avoid it, because we want to fully utilize the Social Security benefits. So one way around that is to, first of all, not earn more than the $24,480, or postponing Social Security until your full retirement age, or at least until you know for sure you're no longer going to be earning income. Now, once you do turn the full retirement age, you no longer have to give any of your Social Security back. That goes away. So that's one thing to keep in mind with deciding when to start your Social Security. Another thing is at kind of the other end of things, at age 70, that's when the Social Security benefit stops growing. So between your full retirement age, let's say 67, this example, to age 70, that benefit grows about 8% per year each year you delay. So one strategy is you can use your other retirement sources, maybe your 401k or 403b or whatever, brokerage account, whatever you have saved up to use in retirement. I apologize, the light always goes off in this room here. So let's see if I can get it popping back on here. So for Social Security, you might want to use your other resources depending. So we've done break-even analysis where it shows us for those that delay taking Social Security at age 70, the break-even point is usually around age 81, 82. So what that tells us, as long as people are living that long, then waiting until age 70 could be beneficial. However, we don't know how long we're going to live. And potentially we might want the Social Security benefits to be coming in when we're still healthy and capable of using that money for travel or other needs. So it's not an all or nothing. There's no like black and white answer when to start Social Security. You really want to look at your own situation, your own health, longevity, whatever it might be, your lifestyle when making that decision. And there's also some coordination for spouses. For those that are married, the spousal benefit is half of the other spouse's full retirement age benefit. So, and you can collect either the higher of that benefit or your own benefit. You can't collect both, and you no longer can delay collecting on your own and having your benefit go. I think Social Security caught on to that, so they did away with that. And most people don't realize this. I've learned over time that Social Security is actually taxable for most people. So it's taxable most of the time, about 85%, and it's based on your other income. It does factor in. So that's just something to be mindful of. If you do want to have federal withholding on your benefit, there actually is a form you can fill out and submit to your local Social Security office, which makes it really helpful and easy to update. But there is no state benefits that or state withholding that you can do on your benefit at this time. So another big thing for those that want to retire is healthcare. You know, a lot of our clients will delay retirement because of not being Medicare age, which is 65 years old. There are some options available for those retiring before age 65. So you can potentially continue your own employer coverage sometime in the form of a retiree plan if your plan allows for it. There's also COBRA coverage. So it's really, that's a continuation of your employer plan. And it's usually set for a period of time that you can do that. You could also pick up your own private insurance. Usually it's pretty costly. And there's also the marketplace plans. So it's important to start Medicare when you're eligible. Now, for those that continue working past age 65, most often than not, your employer plan is considered eligible coverage to be eligible for our Medicare. So that means you don't necessarily have to pick up the Medicare Part B, which is the doctor component of Medicare, until your employer coverage ends. But there is a Medicare Part B and also a Medicare Part D penalty. So you want to make sure your employer plan's eligible, or when you're 65, you want to begin that enrollment process. And Medicare can be extremely confusing. They use a ton of letters for both the Medicare plans and also supplemental plans. So there is the traditional Medicare, which is Medicare Part E, which is the hospital component of Medicare. Most people don't pay for Medicare Part A. And there's Medicare Part B. There is a premium. It's over $200 a month per person. And that is the doctor component of Medicare. Most of us have to pay that. And then you can kind of fill the gaps by picking up a supplemental plan, what's known as a Medigap plan. And there's also a Medicare Advantage plan, which would take over Medicare. So there's lots of choices there. So it's important to understand all the options available and what fits the best for you. There's also Medicare Part D, which, by the way, is prescription component of Medicare. So most people haven't really heard of IRMA. So IRMA stands for the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. So it's an extra Medicare premium that you get the privilege of paying, Medicare Part B and D premium that's based on your adjusted gross income. And it's in different tiers. So there's lots of tax planning that kind of plays into this. And this is where I get really excited because I enjoy the tax planning aspect of planning just in general. So there comes a opportunity for those that may be at a lower income. Maybe their bracket's lower, maybe they stopped working, they're not receiving Social Security yet, or maybe a pension. So for those in a really low tax bracket, before those other income sources kind of start, you might want to look at doing a Roth conversion. So a Roth conversion is where you take money in, like, for example, a traditional IRA, and you pay the taxes on it because it's a traditional piece. You pay the taxes now, and then you roll that into a Roth IRA, which grows tax-free. So yes, you're paying taxes on it, but it could be a great opportunity to put some money away in the Roth bucket, especially if you think your income bracket or your tax bracket at that point would be less than what it is in retirement. Also, withdrawals play into that too. So for those that might need money in their retirement years, when you're at a lower tax bracket, You might want to take some money early on and just kind of put it off into the side. Also, there's QCDs and RMDs. Yes, we use alphabet soup here in finance. So QCDs stand for Qualified Charitable Distributions, and RMDs is Required Minimum Distributions. So for those over between 73 to 75, the required minimum distribution is the minimum amount that you need to take out of your traditional IRAs or your retirement plans, other than a Roth, doesn't apply to Roths, and you get the privilege of paying the tax on that. So one way, if you're charitably inclined, you can actually take that money from your IRA and send it directly to the charity in the form of a qualified charitable distribution. And what happens at that point is that income that you send to the charity would be completely free of tax. It is not included in your income at all, which, by the way, the excess Medicare premium or IRMA is based on your other income. So this could be a really great planning opportunity to lower your adjusted gross income. So that way you don't have to pay as much excess Medicare premiums. So you really want to be mindful of your adjusted gross income and how that plays in based on the different buckets that you're withdrawing from it. So the first 5 years of retirement is really important because this kind of sets the tone for retirement in totality. You get a feeling for your withdrawals in retirement, your lifestyle changes, you get a little bit more time on your hands, which could result in spending more in theory. So just trying to establishing those habits. Also, there could be market volatility during those periods of time. So just trying to maneuver through that in what different buckets to withdraw from for yourselves. There's some stress testing that you might want to consider doing. Usually the first 5 years of retirement, if there's a market downturn, it could greatly impact the portfolio. So what you might want to consider doing is having some excess funds, maybe in like a certificate of deposits, money market, cash savings, that type of account, that wouldn't be necessarily impacted by the stock market movements. That way it gives you some flexibility where to withdraw from, because you want to usually buy low, sell high. And if there is a downturn in the market, you might want to look to withdraw from other sources that aren't related to the stock market, because you lose that opportunity to have the money compounding or growing in your portfolio if you do the withdrawals early on in a down market. There's also, of course, healthcare surprises. As we get older, our health doesn't tend to uphold as well as it does when we're younger. And so having some extra funds kind of set aside for upcoming healthcare costs, or even just understanding your own health insurance plan to select the one that fits kind of your picture is good to do as well. And there could be changes in different goals that you might have. Maybe at one point you want a larger house, then you want to downsize. And also family circumstances change over time. So just being mindful, kind of thinking forward, what things might look like and kind of plan for those upcoming events. So some common mistakes we see is people waiting too long to plan. So you are here today. Thank you for being here. You're taking the first step or one of the steps kind of on this journey. So planning ahead is really important because it sets the ground to kind of your future and what that might look like. And, another kind of mistake could be claiming Social Security without a strategy. So it's good to understand all of the options, because you wouldn't want to get into a situation where you decided to claim it early and then you go back to work and now you're paying some of your Social Security back. And just underestimating the cost of healthcare. Healthcare is expensive. We're all feeling it. I understand it. And so just planning for those upcoming expenses. Dental, for example, most people don't typically pick up dental plans when they're retired. So you might want to put some extra funds on the side for dental costs. Some other things to think about is taking too much or maybe taking too little investment risk. So we can't put our money under the mattress. We would actually not be protecting it because inflation would erode away your money under your mattress. We also don't want to put everything in the stock market. You don't want to put too many things in one basket. So having a balanced approach that fits the risk that you're willing to take and also your lifestyle is something that's really important to understand. You also don't want to necessarily overreact to the market. Markets will be volatile from time to time. So, kind of riding out the waves is the best approach to that, and just trying to strip away some of that emotional aspect of investing. And, focusing on one piece versus the entire picture. So, retirement to me is very much like a gearing system. You move one gear one way and the gear over here turns. So, you really want to look at everything holistically. You want to understand the different type of investment accounts that you have. When you go to withdraw from them, how is that going to impact income taxes? And then the income that you have coming in. Here goes my lights again. Um, so you want to have everything coordinate and work together. And you want to make sure you're taking advantage of any tax planning opportunities because that could set some more funds in your pocket, which I think is really exciting. So I'm kind of bringing it all together here. So the key takeaways is, retirement, it's a process. It's not just one decision. There's lots of different components that play in to understanding what that looks like for you and what is in the best interest of for yourself here. And income planning is the foundation, understanding what type of income sources you have coming in, paying yourself from the accounts that you've worked so hard to grow and develop over the years, and also the timing and coordination of when to take the money out, hopefully in a lower tax bracket, and maybe putting that aside in years you might not necessarily need it. And then just planning ahead in totality, kind of looking out for those things that are coming your way down the pipeline. So that way you are planning instead of reacting to events that come up.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future updates. Looking for more insights like this? Head over to our website at jgua.com for additional resources. And if you'd like to talk about your personal financial goals, we'd love to help. Just click the Schedule a Meeting button highlighted on your screen to book your complimentary consultation. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you in the next video.